was wrong to say. I wouldn't change a thing, 'cause in the story of our lives, the best of times through colored glass. Time rolls on enough to let me move on past, but every little now and then it creeps on back to shape my smile.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whichever the case may be. For all of you listening out there across the crazy planet Earth, welcome to a brand new episode of Vestiges After Dark. And I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, coming to you live from the deep woods of Western Georgia on this November 12th, 2024. Tonight, we cover the subject of divinatory ethics, specifically how to give and how one would give an ethical tarot reading. Certainly, tarot is sometimes all the rage at fairs and, various new age shops and places off the highway. You'll see them. And you wonder sometimes, are these people operating in an ethical capacity, or are they just there to entertain you? What about those that take it seriously? Well, tonight, our returning guest, James Ferrera, is one of these who does, and he's going to teach you all about the ethics of divination. You don't want to miss it. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Vestiges After Dark. Once again, I am your host, Bishop Brian Willett, and I am so happy that you are here with us this evening on this Tuesday of November to talk about the wondrous subjects that we cover on this show. This is, I guarantee you, the only place that you'll ever see a Catholic bishop talk about tarot in the affirmative, in a positive way. And we definitely discuss these subjects in the most, well, we try at least to shed them in the best light possible. It's not that I don't talk about the risks. There are definitely risks anytime you do any deep spiritual work, but we're going to talk about that tonight, among other things as well, coming up on the second and third hours. We'll even be taking your questions, probably on the third hour tonight, where we can really get into what might be on your mind regarding the ethics of divination. Because there's certainly a lot in this particular arena that can go wrong. There's a lot of manipulation and vulnerability that can happen in the realm of spirituality and religion. We see it all the time. It's a place where trust is sort of necessary, and when people betray one's trust, that can be very problematic. So coming up on the second hour, we're going to talk all about that with our guest. But we have joining us on Zoom all the way 2 hours away south of me here in Georgia, we have Jamie Wolf. How you doing tonight, Jamie?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Sorry I'm not there. My retired working dog is pretty sick, and he's at the ICU at Auburn University Vet Hospital. But we're confident, hopefully, he'll be able to come home tomorrow.
Yeah.
So I need to be close to the phone in case I got to jet over there.
Yeah. Hopefully nothing will happen, and they'll just basically say he had an upset stomach. That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be nice. Yeah, he is my bomb dog for 2.5 years, and I've had him since 2015.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah. He got to retire before I did, but he's a good boy. The cats don't know what's going on because those are his friends, and they're wandering around the house looking for him.
I bet they are. Yeah, they all grew up with him, right?
He's coming home tomorrow.
Yeah.
He's in good hands. Trust me. He's got those ladies wrapped around his paws.
I'm sure. That's wonderful.
Oh, yeah.
We also have all the way in Australia, Father Chris with us tonight on Zoom. How you doing tonight, Father?
Yeah, I'm good. Chasing my tail a bit at the moment. I was back and forth to Parliament last week because I work for a member of Parliament here in Australia, so I'm back to Canberra and back. And then obviously catching up with all your big news in the United States, which I honestly think that people in Australia and the UK are more interested in it than you guys.
I bet they are. we're fed up with it. We're tired of it. We're sick of the commercials. We're sick of the infighting. We just want a government that functions at this point. I think.
Thank God for this.
Yeah, I know, right? I don't have a liturgical libations tonight. I do not.
I did, in far more important news, I did find a good deal on one of my favorite whiskies, and it's not particularly rare or unusual, but it just happens to be one of my favorite whiskies, which was at the shop opposite where I work. There was a 15-year-old Dalwhinnie, and that's one of my. That was my first ever favorite whiskey, and so it's kind of got a special place in my heart.
There's a bottle of that in my collection. Yeah, I always have one. I do.
It's pretty good.
Yeah,
it's pretty good.
Yeah, it's good stuff. It is good stuff. And joining us from Tennessee, we have Brandon Milam. How you doing tonight, Brandon?
I'm pretty good. I don't have whiskey or anything in my fridge. I just have like a couple of jugs of water, and that's it.
Okay, well, a couple of jugs. Actually, you have more than a couple of jugs. You showed a picture of your refrigerator today, and it looked like pretty much all that was in there was water.
He's got that bachelor fridge.
Yeah, I think he survives on water alone. It's almost miraculous.
It's rough having to give up my Dr. Pepper like that. It's pretty rough.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. Yeah. When you get used to something, I know I wouldn't want to give up my my Bordeaux and my Burgundies. I'll tell you that right now. But yeah, so I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. Remember to like, share, and subscribe. That is what helps the show to stay on the air, even if you don't want to support it financially. But if you do, there is a QR code over there. You can also, if you're on the audio-only version of the show on Spreaker, as well as all the podcast suppliers, you can, or suppliers, that's not the right word, distributors rather, you can just go to esotericcatholic.org. That's esotericcatholic.org and click on donate now. There's a donation page there, and you can just give whatever you want. Hopefully a monthly pledge would be what really helps the show to stay on the air, because that helps us budget. It becomes a regular source of revenue that the ministry can depend on. And make no mistake about it, this is a ministry financed operation. We do not have sponsorships outside of the church. So you are all the sponsors, all of you, the audience and the members of the church. So I just want to remind you all to please consider giving a donation if you like the show. But at the very least, like, share, and subscribe. Okay? That really will help. Honestly, it really does. And I want to say that we're also, this is, I think, the second episode we're airing, or rather simulcasting tonight on TikTok. That seems to have gone through very well without a hitch last time. We had quite a few people on TikTok last time. We've got 31 watching on TikTok right now. So thank you all for joining us. We love our TikTok audience as well as everywhere else, but most of the action happens on YouTube. If you want to come over to the YouTube chat, you can come to the Nicolaitan TV on YouTube. That's where the show, that's really its home. And but we're checking, our moderators are checking all of the chats. So if you have questions later on the show, you can ask them in the chat as well as calling into the show. I'll put that number up there. I know many people don't like to call in, but if you do, the number will be there on the third hour when we start taking your questions, okay? So let's start off tonight with questions from the ether, and Brandon's got some good ones for us tonight. Probably some questions that might be a little too involved to get through in 45 minutes, but we will try. We'll do our best. What's our first one?
So the first one, I think we tried to touch on 2 weeks ago, but so with the research I'm having to do for my book, I can understand from kind of like a theological perspective how Beelzebub and Satan are considered evil. But what you teach in the webinar is that we perceive evil as an accident, with each condition containing the seed of its opposite. So which is correct? Is it the theology that's correct, or is it the esoteric that you teach?
Well, they're both correct, but the theology is not going to speak of these things in the same plain language that we use in the webinar, because the webinar's predominant focus, theology and metaphysics has two different objectives. Theology's objective is to help an individual to discover a relationship to God, and B, to bring that person to salvation, which in the case of the Christian theology is to unite fully with God. So that's its objective, is to find God. Its objective is not to explore existential problems. That's more of metaphysics realm. So in the webinar, I can be a little bit more liberal in how we approach these topics, because I can draw from more than just theology to answer them. And make no mistake about it, a great deal of some of the existential problems of theology cannot be answered by theology. This is why theology tries to answer them with archetypal stories and parables and allegories, because so much of it cannot be expressed within the realm of the objective, which is not to really deal with evil. I mean, really, I think evil gets the limelight, because that's the thing that everybody zeroes in on. That's the thing that people are bothered by. But religion is not about dealing with evil. It's about finding good, and it's about being optimistic and having a reason to be optimistic. It's not supposed to obsess over the darkness. It's basically the only message in theology is that the darkness has been triumphed over. We really don't need to worry about it anymore. We just need to worry about ourselves at this point. We need to catch ourselves up with the rest of the message, which is what Jesus was pretty much giving us the direction towards. But when you start talking about things like the nature of evil, this is why I think it's so important. And I know we have for the last couple of episodes sort of dealt with this at length, so I'm not going to reinvent that wheel again. But I think it is important to remind the audience, particularly if you haven't listened to the last two episodes, that this is why it's so important that the Jewish model from which we derive all of the Old Testament is really superior in understanding the nature of evil than anything that came after it. Because I think what happened, and that's because of the Zoroastrian influence that we've talked at length with JJ about and everything else, it distorted the perspective, not to the point that it's wrong, but that it's confusing now, more confusing than it needs to be. What's really the most important thing that people need to understand about evil is that evil cannot, and this is good Christian theology. I'm not being too metaphysical yet, but there is evil really cannot exist, because within the perfection of God's creation, the only thing that could produce evil is that which is free as God is, but not as perfect as he is. And that's where we come in. Okay? If we're going to use the full allegory that we've talked a lot about also in the last few episodes with the Enochian model of fallen angels, if we're going to use that as the reason for evil, well, then that negates everything in the Jewish model, which is, again, as I said, superior, because it doesn't put evil against God. It puts evil in our ballpark. It's our responsibility, because of our freedom that God gives us. But when you start putting angels there, if you were to say, well, there was already a war in heaven before we even came into the picture, and that assumes that the universe was already partially fallen, so we're not responsible for that. And then you have to take it even further and say that all these fallen angels, tempted us to do the wrong thing. They were far more powerful, more intelligent than we are. Is it our fault? Are we really culpable? This is the problem with that model. And I can understand why people, while Christians throughout the centuries jumped at the chance, because this was a chance to find a scapegoat. And that's what they did. People love scapegoats. We see it with, Father Chris was talking about the politics, right? Just got out of this crazy election year. And it's all about scapegoating. Both sides trying to scapegoat the other one into the blame for why things suck. And it's like Christians do this too, but they don't want to take the blame for it. They don't want to be responsible for the fall. They don't want to be responsible for sin. They want to believe that they were tempted, that it's not entirely their fault, that there's some horrible evil being, out to get them. And this is just not consistent with Jewish theology at all, from which we are supposed to derive our understanding of God. Now, granted, it must be understood that from the Christian theological vantage point, the Jewish worldview is incomplete. God through Christ hadn't fully revealed all of these mysteries to us. So this is why the Jewish understanding wouldn't be, from the Christian perspective, as complete as what the Christian perspective has. But we have to always be careful. And this is where we can get some wonderful extra material from the writers like St. Augustine and Thomas Aquinas, because when you really start looking at the problem of evil, because Thomas Aquinas did a great job, a brilliant job, but Augustine did too, with trying to understand the problem of evil, because the Bible doesn't really go into it. And Thomas Aquinas was into the metaphysics as well. He wanted to understand the existential aspects of it. And this is where it was concluded definitively that evil's really not a thing. It's an absence of a thing. You can say that a shadow affects the perception of an area, but it's not a thing in and of itself. It's the absence of the light being able to penetrate that area. It infects the environment, yes, but it's not real. Shadow's not real. A shadow doesn't really exist. It's just the effect, a perception that's caused by something blocking the light. And the same thing's true of evil. Evil doesn't really exist. It's just blocking the goodness of God. And what is that thing that's casting the shadow? What's blocking the goodness of God? That's our sin. That's our unwillingness to do the right thing. That's Christian theology in a nutshell. I don't think we need fallen angels and demons and Satan and all this stuff to explain that anymore. That was my argument over the last couple of episodes. And, this is your question here tonight is another reason why that's so important, why in the webinar, I don't get into that, because what I'd rather get into is understanding the existential aspects of, well, then what is evil? Well, evil is an accident of freedom. Ultimately, it's an accident of freedom. Freedom when you give it to something that's less perfect than perfection.
I think a few of these things can be true at once, and I'm not suggesting that you think otherwise. I think that's what you basically just said. But I think evil. If you look at St. Augustine's approach to evil, it's true to say that to summarize, I think he'd say perfect true evil could not exist because all things exist in the context of God. And so, I think a good way to view, that's why there's no real difference between evil and sin, okay? Because what evil is the mutation, the dereliction of something that's good, the decay of something that's good.
Yeah.
And I think, to draw a distinction between a bad person and an evil person is important. You see, a bad person just does naughty things. Okay, being naughty is not the same thing as being evil. Evil is the deliberate destruction of that which is good, and that's why we've spoken about in the confessional. Mm-hmm. When people come to the confession, it's not enough that they've done something bad and they feel sorry about it. It has to actually be something that's grave. It has to be serious matter. And so I think now none of that precludes the notion that angels also rebelled against God. You're right to say that there is a difference for men and women, and that we shouldn't scapegoat our acts of evil, our choices that are evil, on fallen angels. But that's also not to say that there aren't fallen angels. So
I do think
if
there
what
are
you're trying to
fallen
say-
angels. I do think they're fallen angels. I don't think they pre-existed us. I think they fell through us. And I think that's what.
Well, I also think we just can't blame them for anything. I mean, a true Catholic understanding of the devil would say you can't blame the devil for your own evil.
Right.
You can't stand before the judgment seat of God and say, "Oh, well, it was the devil." I'm just a poor, helpless person.
Look
No.
at that. Look at that from the perspective of the book of Genesis. Look at the Garden of Eden story. All right. Why would it even matter? I mean, I know the answer. I know the theological answer, which I think is rubbish. Why would if the serpent? Let's just use the Christian theological perspective that the serpent in the Garden of Eden is Satan, and he's trying to seduce mankind. And they still had a choice. They didn't, he didn't deprive them of the choice. But why would the devil care so much? Now, of course, theology says, because he wants to he hates God and he hates God's creation. He wants to corrupt it. And I mean, that's a good, I guess, kindergarten answer for what happened. And I guess when you're at the kindergarten level, we can accept that. However, let's ask ourselves, why would he need to worry himself as he could wreak havoc without us if he was the kind of fallen creature that Christian traditional theology says he is. But I think there's something else going on there. I think he needed us to fall. So I think the fallen angels that we deal with as exorcists today, and always have been, are really the angelic celestial beings that fall through our fall. I think they needed us to fall because I don't think they have the ability to effectuate that kind. They don't have the same freedom we have.
Well, they're also eternally conquered. And so the only existence they can have, which is only temporary, is a temporal existence, which can only be instantiated through man. Because man is the only bridge between them and God,
That's
essentially.
Right. Yeah.
And so look, I think I can understand why you separate out, Christian theological teaching from the esoteric thing, because you're right. I mean, the really important. I want to say two more things, then I'll shut up. One is,
like I said, this was going to be a big topic for 45 minutes, but we'll do our best.
One is when we talk about the Jewish vision of this, I think we have to be more frank and say there are Judaisms here.
Yeah.
There's no one Jewish map of this. Even when we look to the time of the gospel or when Jesus walked the earth, there are at least 4 different Judaisms represented in the gospel, right?
Yeah, Sadducees, Pharisees, Zealots, and Essenes.
Essenes.
Yeah.
So and since the destruction of the temple in 70 AD by the Romans, whatever Judaism is now is not what it was before 70 AD. So I think we have to be a bit cautious when we talk about the Jewish view, not precluding that that's an important thing to do.
I think they all accept Yetzer Hara, though. I don't think there's much variation. I don't know what the Essenes would have thought about Yetzer Hara because they were very apocalyptic. I think Essenes would have been very Christian in their theology, almost like a proto-Christianity from the sound because they were so apocalyptic. But I really think Sadducees and Pharisees would have accepted Yetzer Hara as we understand it today.
I think that's true, but I think the major shift is how that sin is dealt with. So the Sadducees, the temple cult, therefore all Jews, maybe not the Essenes, are drawn into this. For a future show, the idea of sin and the shedding of blood and forgiveness, which is clearly not what contemporary Judaism is, because it's had to adapt to a post-temple existence, a dispersed existence, and all of this. But I think the other thing your reason to divide these two things is an important one, and you touched on it in what you said. Because the main focus of the church is not the to describe evil,
right,
or to account for damnation. The focus of the church is the salvation of souls, and so all of the effort, like we've said before, the church does not condemn anybody to damnation. although we announce people as saints, but we don't do the reverse,
Right?
Because that's the focus of the church. And so it's perfectly sensible prioritization for anybody involved in Christian ministry to focus their time on the things that lead to salvation. Now, that means that, as we well know, a lot of clergy, professional Christians really don't know an awful lot about demonic activity and about. Now, that's okay. I think probably we've gone too far the other way. I think, and maybe there's a difference here between America and everywhere else.
It is different here. It is very different here in that respect. Yeah.
Yeah. Everywhere else in the Anglosphere, the devil is just. I'm talking about people who are actually believing Christians. The devil, the demonic activity, all of that is that's just fairy tales we told. Pre-Bultmann, before Bultmann demythologized the scriptures for us, and that really annoys me, because to try and remove metaphysics from the Christian faith is absurd, given that our faith is based on the fact that a man rose from the dead.
That's the danger, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that is the danger. We have to find that balance between those two extremes. I think when we take the stories, about demons and fallen angels, and take them to this furthest literal extent, like as if Enoch is like a news report from a news source, that is very problematic, because then you get the kind of sensational Christianity that we see here in the United States that leads to all sorts of problems. But at the same time, when you completely make it and say, "Oh, it's just a fairy tale. It's just a fairy tale. It doesn't mean anything. It was just what they told." Then you get what you're seeing out there. Yeah. Then you see it in Europe, where it's like, then the essence. So why not just say everything's a fairy tale? Jesus was a fairy tale too. I mean, nobody rises from the dead. That doesn't happen. That's just fairy tale. How far do you take it? Okay, how far do you take it? So you've got to find that balance and understand that, yes, while these things, the church did not lie about them. The theology isn't lying about them. Even the tradition, and the traditions, not even talking about holy tradition. I'm just talking about traditional concepts. Even like the Middle Ages with their Dante's Inferno concept. While these are not literal truisms, they're not false. They're just, I try to express it this way. You're trying to understand something that is so far beyond human comprehension that the best that you can do is come up with something that makes it easier to understand. That's why 90% of the time when Jesus is teaching, he's talking in parables. 90% of the time, because he even alludes to it, that when he's talking to his disciples, that he speaks more plainly to them. But that's also because we can assume that they're spending a whole lot more time with him than when he's giving these, these speeches on the mountain and everything else to the larger numbers of people that might only hear him that one time. He's not going to be able to get into those deep things without being. It's kind of like what I do with my students. It's like, Brandon's asking a very student question here. The rest of the audience is like, what the hell is he talking about? Because Brandon is in here, Jamie is part of the class. So you guys are part of that inner teaching that I've been giving for 6-7 years now, practically. Right. But the rest of the world doesn't really even know much about esotericism, metaphysics. They're both true. So to answer the question, Brandon, they're both true. It's just, they're going about expressing truth in two very different fundamental ways. We have to get away from I think, Western world thinking when it comes to truth as being only that which is historical, only that which is concrete, only that which is objective. Truth can be very subjective too. Truth can be ethereal.
The important distinction is between knowledge and wisdom.
Yes.
And so, by the way, not wanting to labor the election too much, but there's been so much evidence of people that say, these people are just too stupid to know how to vote properly.
Oh, there's been a lot of that. Now, there has been a lot of that.
If you college educated people voted this way and stupid people voted the other way. Do you know what? Wisdom does not understand the boundary between college education or being a practical person. Wisdom is beyond any of either of those poles. And so, no, I'm not saying that, one side's right and the other. I'm not taking a side on this. It's not my country. It's not my monkey, not my circus.
You want it? But, you want to have it? I'll give it to
you. This is why I believe in monarchy. But there you go. Monarchy has its benefits.
Oh boy.
Monarchy has lots of benefits, especially constitutional monarchy has lots of benefits. But that aside, people, there's a real arrogance to people who think that knowing a lot of things either makes you superior, and in the case of the church, makes you more saved. Mm-hmm. Actually, yeah. And again, just echoing Christ's great reversals every time he speaks. The meek will inherit the earth, all of that.
Yeah.
Actually, Catholic teaching is the more you know, the higher the standard expected of you. Mm-hmm. So in fact, it's the other way around. And so, yeah, and wisdom is something which has been downplayed in the 21st century in particular. There's a total lack of engagement with what being wise means.
Oh, well, it's not valued at all because it's too subjective. And in the West, and particularly in American West, objective is the only part that really matters to people now. They don't understand how to engage with truth through the more ethereal channels. This is why people are like, well, you're a bishop. Why do you teach divination? Why do you teach tarot? Why do you teach astrology? I mean, you shouldn't be teaching these things. You're a Christian. It's like, this is why I teach these things, because these things are the science of the ethereal. These are the subjective sciences. And there's so much intrinsic value that once you understand how to train your mind to think archetypally, that's where the wisdom starts to come in. And then there's the perfect balance between knowledge and wisdom. I think you're absolutely spot on with this. And I think a lot of your questions, a lot of the conflict that you sometimes exhibit in the questions you ask, from, trying to rise above, the conventions of your upbringing. And I applaud you for that.
There's also a cop analogy.
This is why, though.
There's a cop analogy here.
A cop analogy?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Let's hear it.
Because, I know that Jamie's going to identify with this. When I was at the academy, and I was 20 when I was at the academy as a baby, you have to study lots of criminal law because you've got to go and make decisions on the spot, and you have exams every 5 weeks and all that sort of thing. But whenever what would happen is they'd get, especially like robbery in England, because there's so subtle differences between robbery and theft and assault, right? Mm-hmm. So, and what would happen is every class you'd have a presentation on this is what the law says, okay?
Right.
And at the end of the class, everybody had to go with what if questions, okay?
Yeah.
What if this and what if that and what if the other? And in the end, they were banned because on robbery we had to have an entire 2 extra classes because the what if questions had confused people so much, and in the end, I think the sergeant in charge said, what if your auntie had balls, she'd be your uncle. In other words, no more what if questions, right?
Yes.
But the art of the essence of what was behind that was nervously wanting to have a blueprint for how to deal with absolutely every possible real life scenario.
Yeah, and that just doesn't work that way. No, it has to be experience based.
Yeah.
And so you need that knowledge, but then you need that experience, and the wisdom comes actually once you start to practice that of figuring out what sometimes the least bad thing to do in any circumstance is.
Wisdom comes from experience, whether it's good or bad. You still learn either way.
So going back to what you were just saying, I think like with Brandon's a very concrete thinker and he wants to have the blueprint out there.
It's how Americans are trained. That's what they're trained to be today in school.
It's true. Yeah.
And that's not a criticism, Brandon, just so you know.
No.
I'm only doing that. I'm only doing that to exemplify because people might think, I don't know where I exist in this gap. Well, I'm just describing what the gap is. It's between, a blueprint for life, which does not exist. Thank God it doesn't exist. Otherwise, we'd have a meaningless and purposeless
It's more like
life.
an outline.
Yeah. And I'm sure when we come on to talk about the tarot stuff, it's why we don't believe in a predetermined outcome, right? We don't believe in that.
Well, that's actually a lot of what we're talking about tonight with ethics. Yes,
that's right.
Determinism is really the sin of divination. That we'll talk about that again. Because I know there's always going to be that person out there that says, tarot is evil. It's condemned in the Bible. It's against the Bible. It's against God. It's like, well, okay, no, it's determinism that's against God. The divination's clearly not a problem because there were instances in the Bible where divination was okay to use. Because it wasn't determinism. It was discernment of the will of God. Very different. You could use tarot both ways, but there's really only one valid way, and that is discernment. And I think the only ethical way to use tarot is through discernment. We'll get to that in the second hour, though, so more on that one. But to answer the question, Brandon, they're both correct. They're both true. It's just the webinar is going to give you a more existential answer. Religion's going to give you a theological one. And the goal and objective of theology is not to define, describe, or explain evil as much as it's about helping you to find God, which is really what it should be doing anyway. It would be wasting its time if all it tried to do was explain the nature of evil. Let philosophy deal with that. And see, this is why it's so important. I think we should be teaching kids philosophy. Screw Algebra 2 and trigonometry and calculus. We don't need that. They'll never use it. I mean, if they want to go into engineering, then by all means, eat your heart out in your undergrad degree doing calculus. We don't need high schoolers learning calculus. We need high schoolers understanding philosophy because they're not trained to think.
It should be compulsory to the age of 18.
Correct.
It should be compulsory to the age of 18, full stop,
Critical
in
thinking
every
skills.
single Western country.
Yes, critical thinking skills. Exactly.
Because I think when I grew up, at least in the high school I was in, I don't think I saw a philosophy class offered until I was in college.
Yeah,
even then it was
college.
like one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Neither in mine.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't see it at all until it was in university. Tracy said something very interesting in the chat. Now in the seminary, well, they changed that by the time I went in. We did have philosophy day one, and that was in the minor.
Yeah.
That was in the minor. But Tracy said these days, someone exhibiting wisdom is seen as someone trying to enforce authority over you. This isn't a respect for tried and true experience. It's just subjugation, and that's very true. Is that people reject
I think
authority?
It's actually power.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's power. They view it through that Marxist lens.
Yeah, they do.
That it's a power dynamic.
Yeah, they do.
Maybe they're just wise. Maybe you should just listen.
Maybe you should just listen. Maybe they know a little bit more about life than you do. I mean, did you ever think about that? Okay, what's our next question?
20-year-old that though.
Yeah, no, you can't.
Right.
What's our next one, Brandon?
I remember.
So our next question comes from April. She said, I remember reading about sacrificing animals as a sin offering. What happened to those expectations? I think it was primarily for the Jews.
Okay, well, this is because that's
about this coming up.
Yes, that's because essentially the Romans destroyed the Jewish temple, and the temple is the only place where these types of animal sacrifices can be offered, and then when the diaspora, all this stuff happened where they were scattered, right? Then the Temple Mount became a source of control between Christians and Muslims, and eventually the Muslims won, and they built their mosque on top of Al-Aqsa Mosque, right, on top of it, and now in order to have animal sacrifices again, somebody's going to have to start World War III and knock that mosque down. To build a third temple. And so far, nobody's been willing to do that. But that's what would have to happen to bring it back. So nothing happened to the animal sacrifices. It's just the Jews can't offer them until they get the Temple Mount back. And right now, they're not even allowed to pray there.
There's division.
What's
There's
that?
division amongst Jews. There's division amongst Jews about whether that's something that should be aimed for.
Well, that's true, because they've had to move on. But I don't think that would have happened if they had to figure out a way to understand themselves in light of a post-temple existence,
But I mean, also from a there's also the fact that many Jews, like the first Christians, were Jews, and so we don't talk about a difference between Jews and Christians until the 2nd century AD, and so there was also the reality that although in the immediate aftermath of the resurrection, yep, St. James and others were still going to the temple. There, I don't want to steal my thunder because I've planned a show on this. But you may want to look at the letter to the Hebrews in the New Testament. In fact, I encourage you to, because that'd be good if you read that ahead of whenever I do this show. I've got one planned for whenever there's a gap, where we'll talk about blood sacrifice and you might already be able to guess why many Jews especially those who converted to Christianity and the Christian church since, sees absolutely no need to reestablish the temple in Jerusalem. In fact, I think it's where the Dome of the Rock is actually where the
mosque is like down, but the Dome of the Rock, and it's all part of the same complex, I guess.
Yeah, but the Dome of the Rock was a Christian church. So, when the Templars, when the Knights Templar and all the rest of it, when the Holy Wars were in full swing, there have been times when Christians did control that site, and they certainly had no desire to build a third temple. And we might look at why that is in that show.
Well, the Christians didn't, but I'm sure there were Jews that wanted to. They just didn't have the ability to overcome the Christian authority in the area any more than we've been able to overcome the Muslim authority. So there is an organization in Israel called the Temple Institute, I believe it is, and they are rebuilding. They have already, in fact, rebuilt all of the sacred instruments that are necessary to perform these sacrifices, because they firmly believe that the third temple will one day be rebuilt, and they claim they even know where the Ark of the Covenant is. They say they've always known where it is. That there's I guess under the Kohanim,
them and several other groups.
Well, yeah, but these are people directly linked to the Kohanim that would, if anybody would really know, they would be the ones that would know, because it's truly their lineage. They were the ones that held it last. And so they claim they know where it is, that it has been secret. It's been in hiding all this time for the establishment of the third temple. But then there's Christians that are all gung-ho about this, the evangelical dispensationalists that say, they want the third temple too, because they think that means Jesus is coming back. So they've linked it into the end times stuff that they get into. So, but the reality of it is that, yes, like Father Chris said, there are Jews that have moved on, that don't feel that there's any need for this anymore. But there are Orthodox and a group in Israel called the Ultra Orthodox. You'll never meet a group that hate Christians more. The Ultra Orthodox.
They'll spit on you.
Yeah,
they'll spit on you, and
they do. They'll spit on you. They'll spit on you when you walk by. They hate Christians with a passion. I
love them. I love them. They can spit on me.
Yeah, they can spit on you. You can do the Via Dolorosa and they'll make it authentic for you. But
they can spit at me, but they better miss. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, they would. I think that they would love to have the third temple back. It's fractured, just like Christianity's fractured. Yeah, the ultra Orthodox are a small group, but I think but temple Jews that want to see the rebuilding of the temple, that's larger than it might seem. It's just, I think they just realize, practically speaking, how is that going to ever happen? Because Islam's never going to share the site. They're never going to be like, you know what, we'll give you that section over there to build the temple. That's not going to happen. So the mosque has to go.
It's also a good response to people that say the Israeli government they hate all Muslims and they oppose all Muslims. Well, the Israeli government really do have the power in terms of military might over that site, and yet the only group of people that are not allowed to pray on that mountain are the Jews.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of an interesting sort of nuance.
Well, we put a lot of trust in them too. I think it's Christians sometimes, I think, get a reputation for not being very friendly towards Muslims, but we have to remember that that the only person that holds the keys to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre is a Muslim family. They've held it for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
That's the status quo.
Yeah, and they because they've been entrusted to essentially maintain order amongst all these Christian groups, the primary four ones that are always fighting each other. You see these, go look up on YouTube, these fights at the Holy Sepulchre, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. They're priests acting like animals.
Yeah, I think you showed me some videos.
Yo, it's unbelievable.
Really, look like children.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, they act like children.
At least it shows they care.
Oh, they care.
Western priests wouldn't do that because I don't think they're so passionate.
No, it seems mostly it's the Orthodox churches out there. And I think a lot of it is actually ethnic more than it is religious, but
ethnophilism.
Yeah. Well, the Orthodoxy is plagued by that, unfortunately. I think the Roman Catholic Church has always done universalism much better than the Orthodox Church has. No question about that. But that's the reason. I mean, like Father Chris said, there's Jews that have moved on, but there's a large group that haven't and would love to see the temple back. But the reason we don't have animal sacrifices in Judaism at any level of Judaism is because they can't. They have to be on the Temple Mount, and Mount Moriah is off limits to Jews for prayer. I don't think the Muslims would take kindly to animal sacrifices if they don't even let them go up there and pray quietly. So, that's just the way it is. And there was a time, believe it or not, like 1,000 years ago, there was a time where all three groups could go up there and pray peacefully. The Muslims held it, but they let anybody go up there. That changed, They've become more militant as time goes on, it seems. And now they don't, they're very, very protective over that site. Kind of upsets me because it's like, Muslims have Mecca, they have Medina. That's the first and second holiest sites. Jerusalem is the third holiest site in Islam. I think you can afford to give that one back to the Jews, since that's the only site that the Jews have as far as their holy site. It's the only one that matters to them.
A cynic may also say, isn't it convenient that somehow right at the end, Muhammad decided to ascend from the Temple Mount? Just a little bit convenient, anti-Jewish kind of end to the story.
It's true.
Anyway.
It's true. No, it's not. You're right. I mean, I think it is a bit convenient, but anyway, it is what it is. That's the reason. That's the answer. What's our next question?
So our final question comes from Danielle in response to the episode we did about the haunted dolls. She asks that I was mulling over the thought of energy becoming attached to dolls, cuddly toys, etc., and I couldn't help but wondering, is this a similar process to when you have a PK agent whose energy contributes to over time and then creates energy within a poltergeist?
No, I would say these are different things, because what we were talking about with dolls particularly is, and if you recall, to kind of recap a little bit from what I said on that show, love, biblically speaking, love is literally the nature of God. I mean, Bible actually says God is love, right? And
1 John.
Yeah, well, yeah, thank you. And so God is love, all right? So love, and God is also life. Jesus says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So we know that love and life is literally the closest that we could ever come to seeing the face of God. That is the face of God. It's funny to me, it's humorous to me that atheists struggle so much with understanding the existence of God, when I'm sure they have the capacity to experience life and love. I mean, they're here, right? I'm sure they fall in love like the rest of us. Well, that is God. Maybe it's not the old bearded guy in the sky sitting on a throne that you've been taught to believe in. I don't believe in that God either, but I do believe in life and love. And I know that comes from somewhere, and that origin source is what we would call God. So that is what it is. Okay. So when we exhibit love, and when a child loves a toy or a doll, or a stuffed animal or something, and spends all of its time giving this love to that doll takes on that love and it generates life. And this is how dolls become, haunted. That's the origin point, but it's not usually considered problematic, like in the Annabelle sense, right? Until the doll is no longer cared for. Okay, when it's no longer being loved by the child that gave it life. right? See, this is part of subjective wisdom that objective knowledge could never wrap its head around. It's like, Bishop, you're out of your mind. What a lunatic talking like this. It's a crazy talk. But if you understand esotericism, you know that this is exceptionally true. This is how effigies are made. This is how witchcraft works. Okay, so there's all these witches out there that know exactly what I'm talking about. They're not calling me an idiot.
Yourself to be open-minded,
Yeah.
it makes sense.
Well, of course it does. But you have to understand.
Yeah,
you have to understand the philosophy of the esoteric to really understand this. But and then we can bridge the gap with theology, and then we can put that together and say this is God, and this is how these things come alive. So I know for a fact, I saw my stuffed animals move when I was a child. I know they did. You did too, right? Yeah, we talked about yours.
We talked about it. Yeah.
You know, I distinctly remember having conversations with them and getting answers back that were not me imprinting it into them. I remember this, and it felt perfectly normal when I was really, really young. And of course, you know, you grow up and then you're taught that, oh, well, you were just imagining things, or you're being told that, you know, you're just, it's all in your head. And then we become objectified by school, by our families, by society. And then we forget the ethereal nature of where we came from. But the stuffed animal doesn't, or the doll or whatever. And it will feel just as we would, the neglect and the abandonment and the sadness that comes with that. And sometimes the trauma, which leads to resentment. And that resentment is what produces the haunted doll. It's not a demon entering into a doll and making it move around and stuff like that. It is the resentment of the loss of love. It's a type of evil, really, because it's the absence of good, like we were talking about with the first question. Poltergeist activity is a completely different thing. It's not about injecting life or love into something. That is an energetic disturbance that is usually caused by an energetic change in the field of a person's life force. Typically a teenager going through the raging hormones of puberty, which is why poltergeists are almost always associated with a teenager living in the house. Okay, because they are full of hormones. And what are hormones? Okay, they're neurotransmitters, right? They're chemicals, neurochemicals that are being pumped and produced by our body, but they change the energy field. This is how sexuality works. This is how attraction works. This is why when you're a teenager, you can't get your mind off of it. It takes a lot of effort to not think about sex. Some people never get over that.
Or just being a male in general.
Or just being a male in general, yeah. Because, I mean, hormonally, that's how these energy fields work. And when they're really, really strong, and a person's having to suppress them because obviously society's not going to look kindly on your 13-year-old girl going and having sex with her boyfriend. So she's got to suppress that. But hormones aren't going anywhere. They don't care that she's 13. Biology doesn't care that society says she's too young. It's basically saying your one purpose is to reproduce, go do it. And the suppression of this can lead to an imbalance in the energy field of that person, which actually affects the environment. Now, again, esoterically, any esotericist knows this already. This is how they, metaphysicians see auras, and it's all that. That's all that is. You're reading the energy field. And I can guarantee you a person who can see auras, if they saw a teenager going through these hormonal changes that are so strong that they're affecting their environment into a poltergeist type of event, they would see an extremely vibrant and violent aura around them. Because it's a change in energy, and that just affects the environment. That's completely different than what happens with a doll. They're both paranormal in the sense that people don't really understand it. But why do we call it paranormal? It's not because it's not normal or it's something that's beyond normal. It's because we don't understand it objectively, and we've rejected subjective wisdom. We've rejected anything that does not follow the protocol of the scientific method. It's as if the Age of Enlightenment was the only part of our history that matters. And, occultists and metaphysicians and philosophers largely reject that. I am, for one, do. And it's not, my priest is the least of which that rejects it. In fact, I know many priests that are more scientific than some atheists. I really do. I'm sure Father Chris, you can testify to that too.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and it does make you think. We actually believe in ontological change. Well, that's not a scientific principle.
No.
We if anyone wants to know about that, we can talk about that another time. But we actually believe that the very essence of being a priest is, unless you're a Protestant. I mean, they don't really believe in the priesthood, but the essence of being a priest is a change in your very being that cannot be undone.
Right.
And we believe that about baptism too.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's indelible, the indelible mark. And this is how this works. But a lot of these things are subjective truths. They are true.
This is my doctoral thesis, by the way. This is my doctoral
Is it really?
thesis.
Okay. Well, then we're definitely going to have to do an episode next season with you then on this. Let's do this. Let's do it. Okay. Well, we're pretty much at the top of the hour here, so we are going to take our first break, and when we come back, the journey continues with our guest James Ferrera on tarot and ethics, particularly divinatory ethics, how to give readings ethically. It's going to be interesting. Don't go away.
pieces of ourselves, it's perfect timing now. We fueled the flames, but we're still learning to trust, learning to trust. It's never enough, never enough. Burning me up, burning me up. Don't fight the fire, too much too fast will burn us out. We walk the wire, love. Don't make me read your mind, I know it. Learn to trust, learn to trust. It's never enough, never enough. Burning me up, burning me up. I won't fall when I'm picking you up. With my hand, I won't be strong enough. Our love is stronger, and I'll be here. My lead, now we're taking the jump. My pride, 'cause I know you're the one. Our love is stronger. Baby, I know that it's stronger than yesterday. That it's stronger than yesterday. Two sparks igniting. We left some space for us to breathe. My head is quiet now. I can rest in peace, 'cause you are more than enough, more than enough. Feeling the rush, feeling the rush. Burning in love, burning in love. Two souls united. This roaring blaze is soaring free. If you ever get tired, love, I'll sing you gently to sleep, 'cause you're still more than enough, more than enough. Feeling the rush, feeling the rush. Burning in love, burning in love. I won't fall when I'm picking you up. With my hand, I won't be strong enough. Our love is stronger, and I'll be here. My lead, now we're taking the jump. My pride, 'cause I know you're the one. Our love is stronger. Baby, I know that it's stronger than yesterday. And if you see me falling apart, oh, won't you keep me out in the dark, out in the dark, out in the dark, out in the dark. Hold on, we'll get love through all of the pain, 'cause it's so much more than yesterday, than yesterday.
Welcome back, everyone, to the second hour of Vestiges After Dark. Tonight, we are getting ready to start our topic on divinatory ethics, specifically from the perspective of a tarot reader. Our wonderful returning guest, James Ferrera, is here to discuss this very thing. And I think you're going to find it very enlightening. Hopefully, at the end of this particular show, you'll be ready to find a reader who you can trust. Somebody that isn't going to mislead you or sensationalize the experience, but use it in a helpful way. And that's what this is about tonight. I think you're going to, learn something. So don't go anywhere. I want to just give a big shout out to our TikTok audience. We're up to 119 viewers right now on TikTok. Fantastic. We thank you all for joining us. And we've only been on the platform twice with this show live. So this is fantastic. And of course, I can't really see how many are on Instagram, but from what I can tell, there's quite a few there as well. So thank you on Instagram for joining us, as well as everywhere that you happen to be. And our, of course, classic audience on YouTube and Facebook. You guys have been with us the longest because we've been doing this show on those two platforms the longest. But we welcome you here tonight. Make sure that you like, subscribe, and share. And if you love the show, please give us a donation. All right. So our guest tonight is James Ferrera. He's a dedicated tarot reader whose empathic insight enables him to connect with the cards and with his clients in a sincere and meaningful way. His approach to tarot is a hybrid of scholarship and intuition, as well as spiritual and mental connectedness through meditation. James received his tarot and Reiki certifications from 22 Teaching School of Hermetic Science and Magical Arts in Los Angeles. Currently, he can be found at Tarot Arts in South Pasadena as one of their in-house readers, event moderators, and faculty. He is also a recurring guest reader at the Philosophical Research Society in Los Feliz and the host of a tarot talk show on the Letitia Cartomancy Patreon. In a concurrent reality, James is an award-winning unit publicist in film and television. He has worked on such modern genre hits as Malignant, The Conjuring 2, The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, Annabelle Creation, Annabelle Comes Home, The Nun, The Curse of La Llorona, Lights Out, Insidious Chapter 3, Sinister 2, and the Stephen King adaptations of The Boogeyman and Salem's Lot. James is also the founder of Pookie Helps, www.pookiehelps.com, Instagram @PookieHelps, through which he sells handmade Pookie bags to raise money for animal rescue. Let's welcome James back to Vestiges After Dark. How you doing tonight, James?
I'm doing great after that introduction.
Yeah, you got a great resume. What can I say?
And we got to see Pookie.
Yeah, we got to see Pookie. I love that cat. The first day I met Pookie, we went into his office during the Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, a movie, and we went into James' office, and he had Pookie with him in this large enclosure to keep him safe, and he let him out of the enclosure when we came in, and the cat just jumped on my shoulders. It was wonderful. I love that cat.
He's the best. He really is.
He really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
So last time, you've been on the show before. We talked about the tarot and divination back then, and now we're going to take it one step further. And this is very important. We've never done this topic before, but I think it's something that people really need to keep in mind, largely because there has been, as anything spiritual, misuse of it. I'm sure you remember Miss Cleo, the Psychic Friends Network, and some of these less than, let's say, ethical ways in which tarot has generated a bad reputation with some people. The 900, phone numbers. You get the whole gypsy at the fair kind of motif, and people, manipulating you with predictions that aren't genuine. So there's a lot. As it is in any spiritual exercise, we deal the same thing in religion as priests. We have the same kind of barriers to overcome. We have to deal with people like, and I'm not afraid to say it, Joel Osteen, who have given Christianity a very bad name. And, people think we're all like this, all these money hungry guys, trying to collect money so we can buy our own, personal jet or something. So there's a lot of, already a barrier to overcome in this work. So ethics is really the great barrier here, with helping people to understand how to approach this, or a reader, or even reading for themselves or other people ethically, which is so important. So let's get started with your particular approach, James, and how do you sort of bridge the divide between people's expectation of what tarot reading is and responsible reading?
That's a great question. When I have several different types of clients. So I read at events, I read it at the tarot shop, and for these people that I'm reading for in those places, they're generally people that don't get tarot readings very often or have never had one. And they are frequently people who have a misconception about what tarot is or can do, and the readers. And so, and then I have clients, private clients of mine that understand the deep work that tarot can do. So sometimes I have people who come in and don't want to tell me what their question is, right? And it's my responsibility to help educate them as to the proper way to approach a tarot reading. And one of those ways is by having a question. You can have several depending on how much time you have with a reader, but you deal with one question at a time. And the more specific you can be with the question, the more clarity you're going to get from an answer. So I can, it's my job to explain this to somebody when they don't either have a very clear question in mind or one that they don't want to express. I believe that people always have a question in mind, even when they say they don't, or they don't really know how to formulate it. So another part of that is trying to help them formulate the question if they don't know how to ask it. But if they don't want to tell me what the question is, and I've had people do that almost like a challenge.
Yeah, I was going to say that because I do readings too. I don't do as many as probably you do, but I went through a time where I did a lot of them for other people. And somebody came in without a question. They just wanted me to tell them something about themselves. I knew immediately this person was looking to be entertained. They weren't taking it seriously. They wanted me to wow them with my psychic powers, and I have to educate them. I always did, and disappointed them, I think. Sometimes people would get up and walk away and say, well, I don't want it now. Because it's like, that's not how this works.
Right. And that is something that I tell people, not at the beginning of every reading, but if it comes up, I express to them, I am not psychic, or, maybe I am, maybe everybody is. And there is a school of thought that everybody has the ability to connect psychically, and it's just a matter of developing those powers. And I understand that. I don't disbelieve that, but I don't believe that I'm psychic with the cards. I do believe that the cards are psychic. However, I do believe that, but it's uncanny. It astonishes me every time I sit down to do a reading. And I don't know why I should still be astonished, but it does.
Because it is fascinating.
I hope I'm never not astonished.
Yeah.
It is. That the cards are listening, and sometimes they're listening to the querent, who is the person asking the question. Sometimes they're listening to the querent, and they're listening to what the querent isn't saying. And that's one of the reasons when I'm beginning a tarot reading, I'm shuffling the cards right away. As soon as the person sits down and we start talking, I'm shuffling the cards because I want the cards to pick up on their energy. I want the cards to pick up on their, connect with them psychically. Because when that happens, it kind of doesn't matter whether I'm psychic or not. The cards have been impressed. And then when I lay them out, if I'm doing my job properly as a reader and interpreting them with the guidance that I have from my guides, then I am connecting with the story and the message, hopefully that they need to hear, and delivering it in a way that they need to hear. Mm-hmm. So I have had people outright tell me, yes, I have a question. I'm not going to tell you what it is. and I know other readers who won't do that, who won't play that game.
Yeah.
But for me, I love reading for people so much that I'm willing to do it as long as, and this is where the ethical part of it comes in, they understand where I'm coming from, that I don't believe that they're going to get as much out of the reading without interacting with me and having a conversation with me. Then, it's just not going to be as beneficial or powerful to them. I don't think. Maybe it will be, and they won't tell me that either.
Right. Yeah, that's possible.
But it's, that part of it, that's the beginning. When the person walks, well, actually, the first thing is when the person walks in and expresses their question, or however they interact with me, is being non-judgmental, right? Mm-hmm. I get questions all the time about people's love life, people's career, money, things that questions that I don't believe take full advantage of what the tarot has to offer. But these are questions that are important to this person. They just walked into a room with a complete stranger and laid down, hard-earned money for that privilege to ask this question. So it's important to them, and that means it's important. And that means that there's a connection. And it's not my place to make any sort of judgment about that. And I think that that's one of the most important things from the outset. It's among the list of ethical considerations. I don't make a judgment about somebody's question, other than how can I best answer it, and how can I best try and help them get the information that they need that's going to empower them in some way, right?
Yeah, let's talk about the empowerment, because I think that's a big part of the ethics too. And I'm sure you'd agree that we were talking in the first hour. I'm not sure you had joined us yet, but
yeah, I was here.
Okay, good. We were talking about one of the misconceptions, particularly in Christian circles, that Christians shouldn't or can't do divination because it's sinful, it's against God. There's even a section about this in the Roman Catholic Catechism. So it is pretty much a standard opinion amongst, it might be one of the few things all Christians seem to agree on. And it happens to be completely wrong, because what they're citing as reasons for why this is sinful is twofold. One, because its divination is supposedly condemned in the Bible. And two, because it assumes that a person wants to supersede God because of a lack of trust or faith and get their answers through some other means instead of going directly to God in prayer. So that's the criticism. Problem is, none of those arguments hold any weight when you understand what tarot really is and what it does, and what the sin that is talked about in the Bible, at least, is determinism. It is depriving one of their most sacred gift, the most sacred gift God gives us. In fact, it is above all, more sacred than even life itself. It really is freedom. Because life without freedom is pointless. It's meaningless. I mean, life doesn't have any value without freedom. So freedom is above everything, even above holiness. Because if God put holiness above freedom, then he wouldn't have let Adam and Eve commit original sin, if you want to get theological about it. Because holiness would have been, well, I got to preserve their holiness. They don't know what they're doing, so I've got to make sure that they can't sin. Well, that would have mean they have no freedom to act. But that's not what God does. In fact, not only does he give us freedom, but he even lets us continue to screw up indefinitely, because our freedom is just that sacred to him, right? Because that's what we do. So that's perfect, good Christian theology. So determinism, which is what the Bible's actually condemning with divination, is going to an oracle and saying, the oracle said this, that's it. There's nothing else I can do. It's almost as if now this is divine law. That is what's being condemned, because that's exactly that in necromancy, because necromancy was how divination was pretty much conducted in most cases. Casting of lots, was something that was different. But in the Jewish world, a lot of divination was about conjuring the dead to get answers. So that was also another reason why, because the dead consider unclean and all that, right? So it's part of the Jewish tradition as well.
And there's a lot of cultural connection with connecting with the dead, with ancestors, with their wisdom and the guidance that they can provide.
Yes.
Now, whether you think that that's right or wrong, that, and I'm saying you in the larger sense,
yes,
to
yes.
our audience as well.
Yeah.
We all do it on some level or another when we go to a grave site and speak to a loved one, when we think about a loved one who's gone and talk to them, even when we talk to in prayer, when we talk to Mary or Jesus. I mean, well, Jesus is everlasting, but Mary is dead, and we are talking to the saints, to the people who have gone before us. In hoodoo, in voodoo, these are ways that tribally around the globe people have connected with, and I mean, think of Dia de los Muertos in the Latin American culture. The value that is there, and I'm not saying speaking that's what I do in my practice, but it is something that is, I don't think, sinful.
I don't think there is a difference between communicating with the dead and conjuring the dead.
Conjuring.
Yeah.
Sure.
And
I know a little bit about conjuring.
Yeah, you should. We should. We worked on that one together for a little bit, right? A couple of days we worked together, and you were there all the time.
I mean,
yeah. But no.
Yeah, and listen, and that terrifies me. And I know people whose practice is working with, they conjure demons to help them on a daily basis, or they believe that they're helping them or controlling them. And maybe they are for a period of time. But when you start doing that you're on a slippery slope, and that
Yes,
is
sir.
something that terrifies me, and I
Yeah.
will not.
Won't go down that
Do.
road, right? Yeah.
No.
And that's,
No,
I
no,
think,
no.
really what Scripture's condemning, that and determinism. So getting back to determinism,
Sure.
the idea that when you go to an oracle and it tells you what's happened, now you have no freedom to act. That is fundamentally wrong when it comes to understanding how the tarot actually works, because the tarot, when it's done correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, James, but it opens up the door of opportunities. It shows you the extent of all of the freedom that you actually have access to. And that's really a completely different thing. That's more along the lines of what Scripture is referring to as discernment than it is, determinism or some form of necromancy.
No, it's funny that you bring up discernment, because that was when I was preparing today, sort of thinking about coming onto the show and what I might be talking about. Discernment is one of the words that I used, one of the concepts that I wrote down in my notes, that is being able to make. Listen, when somebody walks into my reading room, the last thing I want to do is take power away from them.
Right.
When they have a question for me, usually they already feel some lack of power, or they wouldn't be coming to me. Right.
Right.
I want to read you something that is foundational to like the core ethic that I work with, and I always try and keep in mind. This is from a writer named Eden Gray,
Okay.
who was she used to be an actress in the 20s and 30s. She was American, and she became one of the first people to write about tarot and how to read the cards to the layperson in the early 1960s, late 1950s. And she wrote a book called A Complete Guide to the Tarot. And in it, she says, never, never, never finish the reading on a discouraging note. Reading the tarot is a great responsibility. It gives you the opportunity to help others gain an insight into what may be holding them back, and giving a discouraging reading with no hope held out for the future is a cruel and pointless thing to do. Mm. While there is life, there is always hope. And there are two parts of that. I mean, I think that the quote itself, what she wrote, is brilliant, because it just seems so evident. But the fact that reading tarot is a great responsibility, it's a great privilege. I always feel that way when someone comes in, that they've given me the privilege of reading for them, that they've trusted me, mm-hmm. and that it is an awesome, I would say, responsibility, beyond great.
Yeah.
Because I'm concerned all the time not how seriously does someone take me, but how much are they investing my interpretation of the cards? How much power are they willing to give away? And how can I stop them from giving any power away? How can I turn it around and give them the power to figure things out, And that's why I think it's important to have a conversation when you have a tarot reading. You're not trying to challenge the reader. You're not trying to stump them. And you're not trying to give away control. You are trying to work through something with somebody who has tools at their disposal and an ability to present them to work with you to help you figure something out.
Yes.
I think that's at the heart of... Sorry, carry on.
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think that's at the heart of one of the cautions, objections from people, from Christians of various backgrounds, is that, and I think what you've just described is an antidote to that concern, because I think one of the concerns is that the primary call is to lean on God, not to lean on other things that might be not so certain in how we choose to live our lives and decisions that we make. And so I think that really is the underpinning concern that's behind a lot of Christians in the world, across the world, when it comes to this subject. So I think it would be quite reassuring for them to hear what you've just said about actually not trying to say, oh, come to me because I'll give you your answers.
Oh no. And also, when I read for people, I encourage them not to return too quickly for another reading, right?
Right.
Take this. If you do want to come back for another reading, that's fine. If you want to look at something else or examine something else, but don't come back and revisit what you just asked me about in the next few weeks, the next month or two. Work through the information that has been given to you, right? So I say, I don't consider myself to be a psychic, but I do believe that I'm being given a message to relay, right? I'm working with guides, that angelic guides that are, I do a purification ritual every time before I set a space to do readings. I invoke the archangels. I call not only for the ability to be able to deliver the messages that people need to hear, but to be given the querents who need to hear these messages, to connect me with the people that need to hear the messages and to connect me with the messages. None of this is self-serving in any way other than I love reading the cards and I love to be able to see when it helps somebody.
You're operating in a capacity very much not like a psychic, but far more like a seer, in almost like the medieval sense, like the medieval kings, even, Christian kings would have seers that would, give them insight, help them discern, to look at nature where there are signs. And basically that's what tarot is, right? I mean, tarot, you're basically facilitating the synchronicity process in something that's deliberate with very clear oracles. They're not, not having to rely upon the subjectivity of, a bird flying in this direction versus that direction, or something that could be,
or a storm.
Yeah. This is something that's very deliberate, very clear. Each of the 78 cards deals with a very fundamental aspect of human nature. So they're designed to work with us. I mean, they are a very specific kind of system. Like when you look at, James, you kind of said it earlier on, most people are coming because there's some kind of issue. But what are the issues that people have? Well, love. Well, there's the cups, right? The suit of cups. Money. Though there's the suit, or career. There's the suit of discs or coins. Spiritual problems. Well, there's the major arcana. Mental anguish, mental problems. Well, there's your suit of swords. Or problems in life. Well, there's your wands, having to work through the challenges, and so everything that a person could possibly be worried about or concerned about, the cards automatically speak to. So they're very clear oracles to someone that knows how to read them, like studied them. But then you facilitate the randomization process. You get an answer that's very specific to the quality of time in that moment, which makes them so brilliant. I wish that priests and spiritual counselors in the church would deploy these resources, because when you don't, you're going in completely blind. You don't have that insight. You're hoping that you in yourself are connected enough to God and you are listening closely enough that you can hear a message that perhaps you can relay. And I'll tell you, I've been to many spiritual counselors it was required as a seminarian to have a spiritual advisor. They were incapable of being able to.
It's not everybody's gift.
No, it isn't.
It isn't. Unfortunately, what's happened in the church and in many other areas of life is we've kind of fallen back on. Oh well, if you got X number of years of experience and you've been responsible and not screwed up, or at least not been caught, then you can be an advisor to somebody else. Actually, that's not. Discernment is a gift. Being a spiritual guide is a gift, and I'd rather have a 20-year-old that had that gift than a 60-year-old that's been a lifelong bureaucrat.
You're not going to find that on a resume.
Yeah. So what James is describing, I think
I can do that. You see, I've never had that problem. Of being called to very varied situations, whether when I was a policeman or now as a priest. I've never had that. I don't know. Is it a gift? I don't know. It just feels natural to me to kind of know where someone's at.
Well, it's also a gift. It's also a gift to know that you're being called to help in this way. And I think, James, this is exactly what you're experiencing, because you kind of found this again, right? I mean, help me remember your journey back to the tarot. But when we got together for that first time, with the Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. You had fallen away from the cards for a while, and I brought my deck over and we did a reading, and it sort of recaptured your interest in it. So do you feel like you're being called to help people in this way? Like this is like almost a vocation.
I do. And it's funny you brought that up, because I never really understood that. I understood it on an intellectual level, but I never really understood when somebody said, oh, I have a calling. I have a calling to be a priest. I have a calling to be a nun. I have a calling to be whatever it may be. I thought, okay, you feel drawn to that. It's greater than that.
Yeah, it's so much stronger.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's a pull. It's a big pull.
It's a pull, it's a push, it's like a black hole that's made of white light. I don't know how else to put it. It was so weird to me. I had never experienced anything like this in my life. And if you ever said to me that I would have said you were crazy. But when I did connect, it was almost like a light went off and a voice was like saying, this way, this is what you're meant to do.
Yeah.
And I still don't know how what this path, where this path may lead me, or how I'm walking it. I just keep doing it and having faith that I'm doing the right thing. But to answer your question about reconnecting with it, yeah, I got my first deck of tarot cards over 30 years ago, and I desperately wanted to understand them, and I just didn't connect with that deck. And it's a beautiful deck. I still have it.
Which one is it, if you don't mind my asking? Which one is it?
Yeah, it's the William Blake Tarot.
William Blake. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
It's not a beginner's tarot deck.
No, it's not.
I got it because I love William Blake, and but all of the suits are named after poetry, science, different things. It was just I didn't connect.
Yeah.
And then the next deck I got was an Atea deck, and again, beautiful. I understand it, both of those decks better now, but at the time it was a real struggle, but I kept going back to it even though I didn't understand it, and I wasn't connecting, I knew that I wanted to connect. And then when you read for me with the Thoth deck, with Crowley's Thoth deck, and you said, I remember you said to me, well, if you go out and get a deck of cards, get this one. This one's really like it's a different system. And it's, I don't remember if you said it was the best one, but there was an implication that it was. I know you like that deck a lot. So I went and got that deck. And I wasn't connecting with it. Yeah. It took a while, but it was persistence. And I don't know why I persisted in something that wasn't working, because all of my life that, 12-step motto or 12-step slogan of doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is the definition of insanity. Well, I was doing that, but
sometimes it works.
Didn't feel insane. Yeah,
sometimes it works. Yeah. The reason I bring this up is because, unfortunately, there is a large quantity of readers that do not take the care or have the motivation that you just described in doing the work. There's a lot of charlatans, I would say, in this, or people that just see it as a casual hobby or entertainment themselves, and they just are entertained through it. But not in it for serious reasons. And see, what you've described is it's the literal definition of discernment. It really is. And vocation, being called to this. It's a gift in the true sense, like we've been talking about all the way, but it's not a gift for everyone. So ethically speaking, that's problematic for someone. How do they find someone more like yourself who's in it for the right reasons, who is in it with the interest of the person's well-being, versus somebody that just sees it as, a scam that they can maybe get a few $100 out of them for, or, some kind of, circus entertainment or whatever. How do you find people more like yourself? What can a person do to safeguard against that risk?
That's a great question. And what I would suggest is to not be afraid to ask some questions. If you're looking for someone to do a reading for you and you have no idea where to go, and you go online and you start looking around, the first thing I would do is read what other people have to say about them and take that, look at those, those comments with a grain of salt too, because there are going to be people who are dissatisfied or disaffected for various reasons, right?
Right.
Maybe the reader didn't put on a good enough show for them, right?
True.
Like you said,
there's people that want that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And or they heard, they got a message that they didn't like, even if it was truth. So evaluate it critically and look at the groundswell of comments. That's really sort of the beginning. If you're just walking along and you see a shop or something like that, I'm not saying that all neon psychics and neon, with the neon crystal ball in the window that says psychic, I'm not saying they're all inauthentic, but there is something to be more cautious about if you're walking by and you decide to go in somewhere like that.
Yeah.
But if you're going by a legitimate shop, right, like where I work or any other sort of esoteric or metaphysical institution, right there, you've got a better shot of having somebody who is not in it to simply make money off of you, right?
Right.
I'm not going to say I'm not interested in making money. I have a living to make, right? Sure. And this is what I love to do. And I want to be able to make a living doing what I do. And I know that that can be controversial within our community. Some people don't think that you should take money for this work.
There are people that think all spirituality needs to be free. I mean, I deal with this all the time. Any priest
Still
can
gotta
tell
pay
you
the
that.
bills, though.
You still got,
Right, exactly.
Churches are not exempt, and neither are you from having to pay bills.
Right.
Exactly. But what I will say is, if you go in somewhere and somebody says to you, "You've got a black cloud hanging over your head. I see a curse. If you give me $200, I can remove it."
Yeah, we've had clients like that.
That's who you walk away from first, right?
Yeah, we have.
And you have to be strong to be able to do that, because you want something and there's a person who says that they can give it to you. But
that's
you
true.
have to, and that is something I think that is also, there's something that requires the querent to be connected to spirit. It doesn't mean that you have to know, because you're clearly seeking, you're looking for answers, but you have to be connected to spirit on some level to be able to discern when you're speaking to someone who is authentic and when you're speaking to somebody who is potentially channeling something dark and taking advantage of you.
Yeah.
I do want to say something in regard to that, though, in your introduction. I want to defend Miss Cleo a little bit.
Okay.
And I highly recommend that anybody who is curious about her watch the HBO documentary on her. She was taken, she wasn't perfect.
She was taken advantage of. Yeah.
She was taken advantage of.
Yeah.
She was railroaded by a psychic network organization. She basically had her identity, even though she sort of created an identity, right, to be able to do the work that she was doing. She felt authentic in that work, and
she passed away, correct?
it was taken away from her. She did pass away. Yeah.
She's gone. Yeah.
I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, that's an American thing. We had during
thing.
about the 90s, Father, we had no shortage of there was Psychic Friends Network, there was the Psychic something network, there was these 1-900 numbers. You paid, it was like something like crazy amounts of money. It was like $5 a minute, $10 a minute, I don't remember. And you know, you would get this reading, and they were really told, they would tell their readers to stay on, keep the people on the line as long as you can. You know,
right.
And just, they had talking points. They didn't even care if you actually read cards. They just had like talking points that you could just tell them that sounded good. And they basically were teaching you a crash course in cold reading. It was not authentic at all. I'm not saying Miss Cleo was absolutely linked into this. I just remember her because that was one of the 900s. Yeah.
She was the face of it.
Yeah, she was.
She was absolutely the face of it.
Yeah.
And but check out that documentary.
I didn't know there was one. That's interesting. I did not know.
Yeah. Sheds a lot of light. But the other thing I would say is, when you go into a tarot reading, maybe even before you engage the tarot reader, just ask them a few questions. You know, do you have any boundaries? Are there things that you won't do in your readings? What do you have? Do you have a code of ethics that you work with? Most people have it printed or on their website.
Oh, really? Oh, that's good.
Yeah, a lot of people do. The Tarot Association has a suggested list on their website. There's a lot of different ones. And I did go looking around on some of those sites before I was coming on here, because I thought, well, what do they say? Maybe I should have looked at that beforehand, right?
Yeah, maybe. You never know, right? It could be something useful.
Well, it reinforced everything that I already was bringing to the table. And so I'll tell you basically what mine are.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Honesty, right? Honesty. Above all else, you do not lie to your clients about what you see in the cards, no matter what you see in the cards. But you can deliver those messages with compassion, and you can deliver difficult messages in a way that helps somebody rather than leaves them despondent. But honesty above all. You don't hide something from the client. There's a reason that these cards came up for them, and they have a right to know. Confidentiality. Now, this might be a gray area. I will sometimes relay some things that have come up in a reading, but I will never reveal the identity, and I will never reveal it in such a way that somebody could be identified, even if I don't say their name. I would never, ever talk about somebody's reading irreverently or make fun of them. So respect for the people that you're reading for, the non-judgmental, the empowerment aspect, making people aware of the fact that I am not an expert in law, healthcare, accounting. If you have issues with your health, and I've had people come to me and say, you know what, I'm supposed to have this operation in 2 weeks, and I'm scared, and I don't know that I want to do it, and I want you to tell me, should I do it? And I this happened to me once. Yeah. And I said to them, I can't tell you that. I can draw cards and we can look at it and we can talk about it, and you can sort of figure out, if that helps it clarify it for you. But you need to consult your doctor. I am not a doctor, and you need to make a decision based in with a professional that can help you.
Let me ask you on that specific question. Let's say a person came to you and asked you that very thing. A very serious illness, very serious operation or procedure. You decide, okay, let's look at the cards, and the cards are like the Tower, the Nine of Swords, all this very nasty stuff that looks like it could even be like death. How would you address that? What would you say would be the ethical way to explore those very dark archetypes with that paired with that question?
I mean, it's hard to say without being in the actual reading, right?
Yeah, of course.
In the actual cards. But if somebody said that to me and I pulled the Tower and the Nine of Swords, did you say another one?
I'm just those as examples, because those tend to be cards I don't like to see when you're talking about health. But
well, sure, yeah. But the Tower is first of all, I would say, and I do tell my clients when I have what appears to be on the face of it a dark reading or a difficult reading. Mm-hmm. And the first thing I say to people is, listen, in our entire lives, every one of us, we moved through every single one of these cards multiple times.
Oh, yes.
So first of all, know that it's just the time for this one for you, and knowing what may be coming. And that's another thing that I tell people in terms of the prediction. I can tell you what I see, but I'm fallible too. And do not take what I say 100% as a prediction of what is absolutely going to happen. It's information to help you make decisions, to draw things towards you that look attractive, or to steer away or be prepared for things that aren't. So if the Tower came up in that regard, my response would probably be, there is clearly an upheaval in your life, with your health, that needs to be addressed. And if it's not addressed, the foundation of what caused this will crumble. You have to address it. You have to look at the situation and evaluate it in a smart way. There may be no way to avoid the Tower, but once you take it could also, listen, there's so many ways. It's really hard for me to speak about this in in an oblique way in this way. But it could also mean once you have this removed, whatever is, or you have whatever operation is, it could be signifying that your health has been built on illness. And in order for you to rebuild, that illness has to fall apart. It has to fall away. Just because you see the tower doesn't mean it's bad. It means it's sudden, and it means it's change, because something is built on a foundation which isn't stable or which is flawed in some way. Once the tower comes down, you're in a position to rebuild stronger. So in that situation, it could be a calling to move forward and listen to your doctor and do the work that you're supposed to do and have the operation. The Nine of Swords is just that anguish, that fear, that anxiety. To me, it's like that is obvious. Like, how am I even predicting anything to you?
Yeah.
How am I even telling you something you don't know? I'm confirming that your feelings are evident and that they're valid, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, and it's the same. The same is true if it's regarding legal matters. If this is where reading becomes such a great responsibility and an awesome one, because I don't take it lightly. I have had people come in to me and say, should I leave my partner? Should I quit my job? Should I move? Should I have an operation? Should I have children? Should I change careers? Is my partner cheating on me? Is someone I love going to die? Am I going to get the promotion? Am I going to meet somebody? You know, what if I'm wrong? What if I read the cards wrong? What if I give them misinformation? I have to trust my guides, and I have to try to give them the information in a way that they can also evaluate it.
I always try to change the question, or have them rephrase the question away from should I, to what will happen if I, what can I expect to experience if I do X, Y, or Z, versus should I do X, Y, or Z? Because that becomes a bit more deterministic, which is, I find, less ethical, problematic. It gets us into problems. We're talking with James Ferrera about tarot and ethics. And when we come back, we'll be taking your questions as well as continuing the discussion. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone, to the third and final hour of Vestiges After Dark. We've been having a fantastic discussion with our returning guest, James Ferrera, tonight about tarot ethics and, the ethics of getting a psychic reading or a divinatory reading of some kind. The discussion continues when we come back here on this next final hour. But if you have questions of your own, we can take them directly from the various chats on all the platforms that we're streaming on right now. Be it on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, YouTube, or Spreaker. And if you want to call into the show, that's the best way to get your question answered. That's 802-321-0073. That's 802-321-0073. Keep your questions limited to tonight's topic, please, so that we can stay on task. It's really interesting. I've got more thoughts when we come back here. Don't go away. One of the questions I once received, actually two kinds of questions I once received as a reader. The first was they wanted me to read another person for them without the other person's permission. The second one was similar to this. It was a celebrity that this person was interested in, and there were some, I guess, allegations or about this particular celebrity, and they wanted me to do a reading to see if those allegations were true. What are your thoughts on that kind of the ethics of those kinds of readings, James?
I'm really happy you brought that up, because that was one of the other things. That was sort of the last thing on the list that I had put together tonight, which was professional boundaries. Some people will do these things and some people won't. I'm not going to make judgments on that. But there are certain things that I don't feel comfortable doing. And one of them is reading other people who aren't there. In the room. And I will say that. Now, sometimes that line can be sort of blurred because someone's trying to understand their relationship with somebody or the consequences of their actions or something. But I'm not, and so there is a little bit of a gray area. However, if they come in and say, I want to know what this person is thinking, I want to know what they're going to do, I'm like, well, then you need to bring them with you.
Yeah.
I will read. It's not, I will read for more than one person or with more than one person in the room. I do typically tend to read for one person at a time. They can consult each other beforehand. I've read for couples, right. Before, but I ask them once they've decided like how they want to approach it, that one person is the person that I am engaging with, and the other person remains quiet during the reading. But also, predicting death. If somebody says, I want to know when I'm going to die, or I want to know if somebody is going to die, or that's no. I mean, I don't have that power to do that anyway. And even if I did, and I mean, maybe especially if I did, I really don't
less likely to do it. Sure, right. Another big question I got, James, was a married person coming in and wanting to know if their spouse was cheating on them. What do you think of that one?
Usually when somebody comes in with that kind of a question, they already know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They
and
just
this
want
is
validation.
also something they want to talk it through with somebody who is a stranger, who's not a friend, who's not a therapist, they just want, maybe there is a part of them that wants the answer or wants someone to tell them the answer they want to hear. I don't know. But when that happens, one thing I will do is, well, there's several things I will do. I will help them. I will say to them, if you're asking me that, I think you probably already know the answer. I will say that.
Mm-hmm.
I will say, if you want to look at the consequences of that, if it's true, then we can look at that. I will help them reformulate, recontextualize the question, but it's not an area that I feel is right for me to be reading for them. What if I'm wrong?
Yeah.
You know, I'm flawed. I like to think that I'm a good reader. I hope I am. Otherwise, why am I doing this?
Right.
But right.
Yeah.
But I am flawed, and my guides aren't flawed. They will be giving me the messages, but I could misread it. And sometimes it's happened where I've realized something later and I have no way of reaching out to that person. Or after we start talking, when I give a reading and they're withholding information from me, and then things start making sense to them, like, okay, did any of that make sense to you? Because I'm getting no feedback from you whatsoever. And then they start saying things, and I'm like, okay, well, that makes more sense now, and that also opens this up. But anyway, I'm digressing a little bit from your question. I would try to help them recontextualize it. I have had some really difficult things happen. One of the first readings that I ever did outward facing for the public, for someone I didn't know, a person came in and I sat down and said, I'm going to take a few deep breaths and reconnect with my guides. And they said to me, oh, you hear demons too?
Oh boy.
Oh boy.
And that's exactly what I thought.
Yeah.
I thought, oh boy, what am I doing? What am I in for? and it was terrifying. And then the next question, what they wanted to know, it was a fairly common question about a partner.
Yeah.
We were on the outs, and I want to know if we're going to get back together. And I'm like, okay. So I'm shuffling the cards, and then they offer on the heels of that, because, they have a restraining order.
Oh,
boy.
Before they even
better and
finished
better.
the sentence, I thought, well, I don't need to read the cards to tell you whether you're going to get back together or not. But I will. it was scary. You know, it was one of the first readings I did for somebody that I didn't know, and that was, you know, and didn't feel safe. But I thought, this person has come in to me for a reason, not just their reason. They've been guided to me for some reason. So how do I help? And partly too, I felt I have a responsibility to the person who has the restraining order out on them as well.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Can I help protect them? Thankfully, the cards gave the message, no, you're not going to get back together with your ex. It was clear as day.
Yeah.
And I was so grateful for that, because
it took the burden off of your shoulders.
It was a, yeah. And so, but it wasn't just that. It was like, where do I go from here? It's got to be more than just this.
Mm-hmm.
If you keep focusing and obsessing on somebody who doesn't want you to be in their life right now, not going to say that restraining order would be there forever, or things couldn't change. I don't know. I don't know you. I don't know the situation. All I can tell you is what I see in the cards. But right now, no. And if you keep focusing on that, when the person that you are supposed to be with comes into your life, you're not going to see them.
Right.
So you have to be prepared. You have to prepare yourself for what you don't know, as well as what is in front of you. When this person left, they felt inspired. They revealed to me that they were also a songwriter, and that they were hearing music for a new song in their head at the end of the reading as they were leaving. That made me sigh, heave a huge sigh of relief.
Well, at least they weren't hearing demons.
Also,
yeah, that's a whoosha moment.
Right.
But it also validated what I'm doing and why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
If I can help somebody who clearly came in with an agenda of wanting something that it was obvious they couldn't have, and thankfully the cards bared that out, and I was able to help them see something else than just no.
Yeah.
Then that makes it all worthwhile, you know?
Definitely. Well, let's take some questions from the chats. Jamie, why don't you start with one that you saw?
I saw one recently from Danielle. It's a good question, too. James, do you find the decks have personalities, so we connect with some and not others, and that we don't choose the deck necessarily, but the deck chooses us?
The first part of the question, absolutely. All of the decks have their own personalities, and even decks that seem to not have much of a difference. I'm thinking particularly of the Marseille style decks, the traditional Marseille decks. There is still, between each of those craft people that made those decks, there are distinguishing elements to them. All of the decks have personality for sure. There are decks that I desperately love that are beautiful, and I want to connect with them so bad, and I just don't. And I try and I try and I try over and over again, and I'm like, why do you keep doing this? And I'll tell you what I do with that in a moment. But because I have quite a few decks, hundreds, and so the second part of that question, that the decks choose us and we don't choose them, I think there's a bit of both in that. There's a lot of superstition around the tarot, and I am not a particularly superstitious person or someone who wants to be led by superstition. I do not believe that your deck has to be gifted to you. A lot of people believe that. Mm-hmm. And I know people who have a tarot deck and they desperately want to read, and someone gave them the deck and they don't connect with it, well, then what good is it? Go out and find a deck that connects with you. I went through so many decks before I finally connected with one and understood that I don't have to connect with every one. So in that way, you do choose the deck. But in the way that you have a connection with it, I think maybe the deck also chooses you. It's a mutual connection. And what I do with the decks, there are some decks where I connect with certain cards and not the entire deck. And then there are other decks that are just beautiful and I don't connect with them as a deck on its own. I like to integrate those decks with other decks, whether they be oracle decks or other tarot decks, or I'll take cards out of one deck that I connect with those cards, but not with the whole deck. And I'll make a magpie deck with other decks, and or just for a particular reading. I love these 5 decks, and I'm going to do a spread where I pull cards from each of these decks and see what they have to say. In that way, if the deck doesn't connect with me or I don't connect with it, they connect with each other and communicate with each other. So you could get an amplified reading from pulling cards from different decks, and especially if it's one that you like but you don't connect with, and see how is that deck, or how are these cards talking to the other deck, talking to the other cards.
I do that with oracles too. I'm like you. I have a lot of different decks, but I also have a lot of different oracles, and I go to different oracles for different reasons. I don't read the same kinds of questions with every oracle. I predominantly use tarot, but I also use I Ching and runes. And I find that they have their own personalities too. Perhaps even more so than the various decks, because tarot, I kind of liken it this way. It's like we have America, right? There's all these different Americans with different perspectives, but we're all speaking the same language. Tarot is kind of like they all speak the same language, but they all have their different personalities they throw into that language. Whereas like I Ching is like a completely different language. And runes is like a completely different language. So it's almost like going to literally a different culture, because we are talking about different cultural influences here. But they are also really, really good at certain types of things. So like when there is a major business decision or some kind of struggle that is complex, I don't typically go to the tarot for that one. I could, and I'd get an answer that I could utilize, but I find the I Ching answers those kinds of questions so much better. So much better. And for runes, I find that runes give me a better perspective on current situations. Like if I'm like in an immediate situation where I would like to know the direction something is going, I find that the runes tend to give me the clearest response to that. I could go to the tarot with that too. I could go with the I Ching with that, but I prefer the runes for those kinds of questions. That's just a personal preference. That's something I would say that we need to only use them this way. But I think that you learn as you develop a relationship with these things, you learn the way that they like to work with you. So I think what you said, that it's kind of a little bit of both, is there's an exchange. I mean, these things are sentient. We've talked about how all of the inanimate objects of the world on this show are sentient in different ways. We tend to, I think, trivialize or disregard inanimate objects as being less than organic things that are living. But there is a sentience that is built into all of reality. And these oracles are truly sentient. I mean, I would say they're almost super sentient in a way. Like you said, they're always listening, and that's a good way to look at it.
And those are two systems that I'm very interested in. There's so much still that I want to learn, and I will never stop learning I will never stop studying. I will never stop engaging in the work, because there's always so much more to learn. But I have a similar relationship with some other forms. I go to the Lenormand for what I find to be more mundane questions that don't. The Lenormand can definitely dig deeper, but it's also really great at answering really basic questions that don't require you to go deeper. And I also find them to be good for timing, because I don't really like doing timing, but I find that the Lenormand is pretty good for that. I've recently started reading with playing cards, cartomancy, which has been really interesting. Yeah. I didn't post anything about it because this is where I'm going to contradict myself. I felt so superstitious about this. I didn't want to put this out into the world. But the Sunday before the election, I predicted a Trump win with the playing cards. I rationalized it as you're reading it wrong. It's reading the other way, but I knew that the reading was what it was.
Yeah.
And so the morning of the election, I pulled another 3 cards from the playing cards, and it was not the same cards, but it was the same message. It was even more resoundingly strong. So it's interesting. I like to cast, objects. I like to, there's messages can come through in so many different ways. Right?
I did. I've been doing tarot for 30 something years, a little more than 30 years. And I've done a reading on every election, and I've predicted every election correctly. A 100% rate on success with that particular question.
Well, I know you did the last 3 because I was.
You were there. You were there for it. Yeah.
Or heard about it right after you did it. Yeah.
I wasn't going to do this one. Because I was just so disinterested in it. I'm so over it. It's just like I didn't even care enough. It's like I'm so done with both of them. So I wasn't going to do it. And then one of my students said, "Have you done your election reading?" It's like, I can if you want me to. If I give me a reason to do it, because I don't have the motivation. So I went and did it. And when I do a very simple spread for election readings, I just do a card on the left for the left, the liberal candidate, and I do a card on the right for the conservative. And so Kamala came up with prudence, which is the drawing a blank on it now. The 6 of discs, and Trump got the 9 of cups. And so how I interpreted that was that while Kamala had the more strategic campaign and under normal circumstances probably could have won, she couldn't overcome the emotional voting that led to the celebratory Trump victory, because it clearly the 9 of Cups is also about celebration. So typically when you're asking about if someone's going to win something, if the 9 of Cups shows up, it means they're celebrating. So it was very obvious to me. So I said, no, it's a Trump win. It's possible because prudence isn't exactly a bad archetype. It's just it can't overcome the emotionalism of that 9 of Cups. It's like usually sometimes readers will refer to it as the card of wishes coming true for the person that you're reading about. So when you're doing an election reading, it's about the candidates themselves. So clearly it was the wish coming true for Trump, and it was obvious. So
I predicted it too, but that's just
you didn't need cards for it. Is that what? What did they say out there in Australia? They all said Trump, right?
Well, I mean, the elites here are worse than they are in America. I mean, even the people on the right, the so-called right-wing party, which there isn't really one in Australia, but even they were all hoping for Kamala.
Really?
Democrat fans. Yeah.
Hoping, but I think they all thought that Trump would win, though. Or maybe they were afraid that Trump would win.
There were, lots of the chattering classes I was kind of enjoying I argue with them on Twitter, not using my full name.
Yeah.
Smart.
But we digress, you guys. We digress.
I know, you're right. I don't want to bring crap on the person I work for. Is the reason I do that.
I gotcha.
Not because I'm, not because I'm not willing to front it out myself. But yeah, I don't know. They a lot were like, oh, there's no way it's got to be this. But
well, the cards said that would, and when we got 2 readers, I actually talked to other readers, about it, and everybody that I talked to was predicting a Trump victory, and it's clearly what happened. Brandon, what's our next question? You can pick one from your own or anything you see in the chat that's interesting.
So we did have another question in the chat, but I have one that I kind of want your opinion on, James. So with tarot and with readings and with the rise of artificial intelligence, what is your opinion on people who are starting tarot reading for themselves and then they resort to using AI to interpret the readings for them rather than forming a relationship with the cards?
That's a great question. There's a part of me with the advent of AI and the rapid rise of its implementation in so many different fields. I can see the work that I do in the film industry going away very quickly. I can see the work that a lot of other people I know in the industry and in other industries being replaced. Because I'll tell you, I don't care what anybody in business says. If they can get rid of you and take that money for themselves because they're up at the top making those decisions, they will do it. And so when I started to see that happening, I didn't start doing this work because of that. I had already been doing it. But there was a part of me that thought, well, you're doing work that cannot be replaced by AI. Just like a psychotherapist, right? I mean, a doctor, a surgeon, they can be replaced by AI and eventually probably will be.
They largely are already. I mean, people can Google stuff like drug interactions, that's the first part of that replacement, right?
Right. That is part of it. But eventually it'll be institutionalized, right? You're not going to want to trust a human doctor or a human surgeon to put a stent in your heart because that the machine has a better track record. And think about airplanes. Airplanes aren't flown. We have pilots in them now, but they don't fly them. They are flown by computers, 100% or 98%. And so although I know that AI will, or certain people behind business models with AI will try to create a replacement for readers, ultimately you can't replace the human interaction. You can't replace the human component that is interpreting the cards. I will tell you one thing. Gabrielle is not speaking through AI to somebody. There are no angelic messengers talking through that system. They speak through people. I shouldn't say they speak through. They're there. They're guides. They help us see things. They're not guiding the computer. I don't know. Somebody else might argue with me about that. If somebody needs a message, will they travel through that conduit?
Well, I think it depends upon how the computer generates the answer. So if you're talking about pure interpretation, like what sounds like Brandon's referring to, you shuffle the cards, you lay them out, but then you tell like ChatGPT what you drew with your question, and then it will try to put together the answer based upon your question. But if you're talking like, well, for example, I'll be completely honest. I've done this before. I've done numerous experiments with this, so I'm kind of interested in this question. It's a good one, Brandon. Another good one. There's an app on my phone that I have. It's a rune app, and most of the time, what it is I just use it as sometimes if I need to do runes on the fly. And I even though I know what they mean, I still like reading descriptions because it helps to provoke a journey. And that's why I'll sometimes, like, even though I know what all the tarot cards mean, I know what all the hexagrams of the I Ching mean, I know what all the runes mean, I still like getting all my books out and reading what every author says about it, just because it gives me a complete picture and it puts me on a journey inside my mind so I can see more. I don't have to do that. I just like doing that. But so I have an app on my phone for runes that does this, but it also can generate, using a random number generator, a rune. So you can close your eyes, push the screen, and it will generate a rune. And I have found that it works just as effectively as using a physical rune. I think what it is synchronicity works the same way, whether or not you're physically shuffling or whether or not you're using a random number generator, because it's the same quality of time affecting all instrumentation. Regardless of how the information is coming to you, the same data is available, and a random number generator is still going to pull the same information from it. But if ChatGPT is not doing that, if it's not truly creating a random response, but rather simulating one, then I would say that it probably couldn't actually. Maybe we should try it. I mean, maybe what we'll do on the next show during the first hour is I'll hook up ChatGPT and we'll have somebody we'll ask it to give a reading, and it can randomly say draw a deck, and see what it said and see if the rating makes any sense to that person. It would be interesting to see. It's a good question.
Well, it's a great question. One thing that you're talking about, I have some apps on my phone too for tarot that will randomly generate cards or spreads, and that's fine. It's the interpretation. It's the reading of the cards. Yeah, I can go to a book, and I read a lot too. Like I said, I'm always studying. But I can go to a book and look up the meanings of the cards and string it all together and regurgitate it. That's not a reading.
Right.
That's not an interpretation. I mean, I guess it is a reading, but it's not it's not authentic. It's not an authentic connection, the reading of it. The random generation, I don't have a problem with. And if you're looking at the computer or you're asking AI to tell you what is the definition traditionally associated with this card, okay. But there's more to it than that, I believe.
Yeah, I think you're right on that, definitely. Yeah, I mean, remind me, Brandon, next week, which is the final show of this season. We'll ask ChatGPT to do a reading. And we'll see. We'll have it do everything, even the interpretation. We'll see it. We'll see how it goes. I mean, it's not obviously scientific, but it would be kind of interesting to see how it would work and how it would answer that question. Probably fight me on it at first. Be like, well, I can't really do that, but then it can, because it'd be like, no, I know you can do it, and then you can convince it to do it. I do that with ChatGPT all the time. That's a good question. Father Chris, do you have any of your own or any that you've seen that you want to ask?
No, I'm pondering a few things, but Daniel asked one about voice vibrations. Whether people's voice vibrations have any. You think that has any impact on, the interaction and how the cards are dealt. You're talking to them while you're shuffling. Whether you think people's voice vibration has any interaction with that.
Funny, when you were saying that initially, I was thinking, because I do practice ritual hermetic magic, and there's a lot of vibration associated with that. But it's ritual vibration and invoking holy names and things like that. In a way,
I'm much more interested in that. So go for it.
And that's one of the things when I was saying I do a cleansing of the space that I'm working in. The most basic thing that I will do is perform a Kabbalistic cross and a lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, and it's invoking Raphael and Gabriel and Michael and Uriel, and for protection and with the sacred names, some of the sacred names of God. And it's not a ritual that I take lightly at all, but the vibration of the portions of that ritual, and the vibrating the names of God and the archangels is powerful, and it clears the space, and opens up the space for the magical work, and the messages to come through on the larger level of vibration, right? And yes, and so that's sort of a vibration that remains in the room, much like, I also think, I love my bowl, the vibration continues after I've struck the side of the bowl. The vibration continues in the room once I've finished a ritual. And the vibrations of somebody's voice when they're asking a question or we're having a conversation lingers in the cards. It gets folded in between them. If I'm sitting here and I'm shuffling as we're talking, the vibrations of our voice, my intention for the querent's impression, their vibrations, the cards understand that it's theirs. Mine are there to help draw out theirs, but they get embedded here and impressed. And I do a cleansing of the deck between each reading.
Is it not actually both? Is it not that they're listening to? Because could it be that, and maybe a reason why people respond to some readers more than others, is that there's actually a blending of those voice vibrations. And that's practically what's happening.
Well, I think that there's to the question that somebody asked earlier about,
sure,
do you choose the cards or do the cards choose you? However that impression, that connection is made, it is made. And so there is a symbiosis between the cards. I mean, I'm sitting here as an example, shuffling a deck in my hands that I just got today. I have no relationship with this deck whatsoever. It's fascinating. I love it. It's The Secret Teachings of Adam and Eve. That's Joseph.
Oh, cool.
And yeah, it's a pretty incredible Old Testament style deck. But I just got it. I don't know anything about it. Now, if I go over here to, one of the decks that I use all the time, we have an understanding. And so the vibrations of my voice intermingled with the cards is symbiotic, whereas the vibrations of somebody else, the querent, coming in are able to be distinguished, I believe, by the deck, because the deck and I talk to each other all the time. We know each other. It recognizes me.
It's a new voice. Yeah.
Yeah.
James, we got one from Instagram here from Pando. How do folks know if a dark energy or force is guiding a reading or not?
That's interesting. And I'm curious, Pando, are you asking as the person asking the question or the reader? I'm presuming it's the person asking the question.
I think they're asking you. How does a reader know?
How do I know?
Yeah, they asked it twice, and I'm looking a little bit further down. And it says, "How does a reader know it's not a dark energy guiding a reading, or is it a spirit guide, or that a spirit guide isn't a dark energy?" That's what he's asking.
I mean, I think you would know it. I think that you would know it. I think that I've spent enough time around darkness to know when darkness is wearing a mask, right?
Right.
When I invoke the spirit guides, the angelic guides, I'm not calling into the dark side of things. And so if I'm not calling into that dark side, I don't see how that dark side is coming through. Bishop, when you came out to our set, and I've heard other people say this too, who are spiritual leaders who have come to our sets. The work that we do, the spirit world. So I'm talking about the fiction work in horror films, and particularly those films dealing with possession and whatnot. The spirit world, the demonic world, doesn't make a distinction between fiction and reality when you're doing the actions, when you're replicating the actions of dark arts or dark things occurring, that they hear these things. Well, I've always believed that in the brushes I may have had with that, in shutting my mind to it, not allowing them entry, that is defense. There's a level of defense that I cultivate in my practice.
Yeah.
And when there's so much connection and ritual and light and working constantly to ascend through the different astral planes and the tree of life towards Keter, towards source, towards the spark of all goodness, and my intention is to do it with harm to none, I don't think there's room for a dark energy to come in there. And if it did, I feel like I would know it.
It could only come through you anyway. I mean, that's the thing, is that the risk of using tarot cards, the risk of any occult practices is whether or not you yourself as the practitioner are ready to engage with it. If there's any darkness within yourself that you haven't dealt with, at least, to the degree that you have some semblance of control over your own life, then yeah, I would say that a person that's in that kind of situation probably should not play with tarot and, go to somebody that can responsibly help them through it. Because we take our own darkness with us. See, this is exactly what you brought up that thing about that I said at the Conjuring, when we came to bless the set, that the archetypes themselves, the spiritual world, for lack of a better word, itself cannot distinguish the difference between what is the fiction of the story in the movie and the reality that we live. And the reason for that is, from the vantage point of the spiritual world, it's all real. Everything's real. Every thought is real. Okay, so even fiction itself is real. It's not part of what we value as reality, which is the physical external world that we tend to assign reality to. But the fact of the matter is, reality is both things. The external world is the shared reality, and the internal world is the subjective reality. It's kind of like what we were talking about in the first hour between wisdom and knowledge. We tend to value only the external, and everything else is all in your head, when everything in here is real too. And so the spiritual world responds to fiction the same way it would to something that you are actually doing in the external sense, in the objective physical sense. It responds the same way because it's all real to that realm of, it's only the distinction's only with us. We only make the distinction because we have a foot in both realms. We have, we have our mind in our internal world, and we have our external world. And the shared one is the consistent one. It's the objective one. It's the observable one. It's the one that more than one person can agree on. So we value it more, but the internal one is just as real. So if you're taking a lot of darkness with you, you're going to end up probably, that darkness is going to come out in a multitude of different ways, and occult work is one of the ways that can happen, which is why sometimes exorcists will say, the tarot cards, or a person got a deck of tarot cards, started playing around with them, and then all of a sudden they had a demonic possession. This is a very common thing that exorcists will talk about. And people get afraid of tarot cards because of it. The fact of the matter is, the demons are not coming out of the tarot deck. They're coming out of you. You're doing some self-reflection you're not ready for. And so the tarot becomes a mirror, and it's reflecting the darkness within. If you're a very light soul, James, you project a lot of goodness. Honestly, you really do, and obviously that's what's going to get reflected out. There's a certain selflessness to your motivations for doing this, and I'm not talking, I think people should be paid for their hard work. So, I don't think there's any conflict in getting paid to do readings at all. I think people should be paid. You did work, you spent time with, your time is valuable. But the motivation to do something like this, that's selfless. In the sense that you want to do it to help people. Psychologists, doctors, not all of them, but a lot of doctors get into medicine because they want to help people, but they still want to get paid for it too, right? They still should be. So it's the same thing. You bring a lot of light, I think, into the work. You have nothing to worry about. But people that bring a lot of darkness into their lives shouldn't mess around with the tarot. Not at all, I don't think. They shouldn't mess around with anything occult, because they will run the risk of that projecting outwards and not being able to control it. You're very fortunate in the sense that your spiritual life has guided you to a type of spiritual maturity that I think has been instrumental in making you who you are. But we're at the end of the show. So very briefly, James, if you could just tell everybody how to contact you, anything you want them to know, and your podcast, all that good stuff.
Yeah, thanks. Well, I have a website. It's called jamesjudetarot.com, and I have a lot of my events on there. You can book readings. I also do virtual readings over the phone or over Zoom. And I'm on Instagram at James Jude Tarot, and YouTube and Facebook also at James Jude Tarot. Everything is James Jude Tarot.
Awesome. James Jude Tarot. Very easy. Well, I just want to thank you for being on, and I hope that you'll come back for maybe a part 2 or 3 or 10. I just love talking with you, and it's always good to see you. Unfortunately,
I feel the same way.
Yeah. Next time, I hope the next time I'm out, in LA, I'll be able to take some time away. I hate how my schedule every time I'm out there is always for work, and it's like, go out there, shoot, get back on the plane, come back. They don't give me much time.
It's all good. Let's do it here again sometime. I would love that.
I think that would be fantastic. And if you're ever out this way, let me know. You're always welcome over here. We've got a guest house you can stay at.
Very sweet. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Always good.
Yeah. And Jamie, Brandon, Father Chris, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, it's a great show. Fantastic topic. And yeah. All right, guys, that's it. Next week, we get a brand new guest with a brand new topic. I'm not going to say too much just yet, but it's our last show of the season before we get to Advent and Christmas. So we're going to have a fantastic closing out, and hopefully Jamie, you'll be with us. And that's next week, Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern time. That's all I got for you tonight. What a great show. What a fantastic audience, too. Thank you all for participating. Look at you guys over there on TikTok, 144 people watching. Thank you so much. Make sure you share and like and subscribe. It really helps the show continue. And we can bring wonderful guests like James on again, okay? Take care. God bless everyone. I'll see you out there in the ether.